Yesterday, the opening of the third Pacific Climate Change Roundtable in Niue brought much focus from guest speakers on climate change effects in the last few years up and to the current tragedy in Japan and Asian countries. Niue's Premier Honourable Toke Talangi firstly paid tribute to the nations around the globe who have recently faced difficulties because of natural disasters, and the region's sympathies and considerate understanding of individual needs of countries who have faced hardship. Premier Talangi also advised that everyone should plan adaptation measures and mitigating infrastructure to help survive the current trends until stabilization in climate situation.
Climate change has been identified by Pacific Island leaders and world leaders as the most challenging and defining phenomena of our time. Climate change crosses all sectors and facets of our lives and cannot be ignored or put aside without some devastating long-term consequences to our countries and indeed Mother Nature and Mother Earth. It is no accident that these meetings now include NGOs, private sector and civil society. As many of you are aware, there are many critical areas that impact climate change decision-making. Political meetings in Copenhagen, Cancun, and Durham in future will determine whether there is political will by all countries to agree on a common objective. This common objective in terms of lowering of greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 levels and the consequential impact on temperature rises will have on our climate and planet.
Director of SPREP, David Shepherd, also focused on the implications of climate change across all sectors and issues of national security. Also the need for accelerated finance to assist countries.
Our leaders have reminded us that climate change has implications across all sectors and is a matter of national security. Countries of the Pacific are among the most vulnerable on Earth to the impacts of climate change. This underlines the need for accelerated finance and also why the increasing involvement of donors and partners is so welcome. SPREP has been supporting Pacific country efforts on climate change for more than 25 years. Our work covers the full spectrum of climate change issues: adaptation, mitigation, policy support, as well as communication and education.
A short pause from the speeches from Honourable Premier and Director Shepherd before the meeting started with the cultural performance from Niue's future implementers of climate change plans, the early childhood education, who educated some participants on the importance of working together to fight effects of climate change. The meeting started after the official opening and speeches, and participants were given a chance to express individual country efforts to implement plans on adaptation and mitigation. The second day of the meeting saw many countries raise issues that they hope will increase the region's capacity in adaptation and mitigation. We also caught up with the Director of SPREP for more views of the meeting and expectations of countries.
Generally, I think we have many challenges in the region relating to climate change. What we're seeing is that there is momentum. It's slower than we would like, but positive momentum from particularly international donors and partners to get behind the efforts of Pacific countries. So we heard yesterday positive presentations from the European Union, Asian Development Bank about activities. There are many supporters in the region, such as the Australian government, UNDP, and amongst others. So what's emphasised yesterday is that these efforts need to be coordinated, they need to be directed at the priorities the countries face, and that funding commitments that have been made, such as those at the Copenhagen climate change, need to be delivered. In the Pacific, we appreciate the commitments, but a strong message from leaders from this roundtable is the need for those commitments to be delivered as quickly as possible to countries to meet their needs.
Have you seen much change? I mean, we hear also from our Premier Toke Talangi yesterday about some of the concerns that the islands have met since Copenhagen, as well as some of the agreements that took place and all the plans for the region?
Well, I think we've seen, this is the third roundtable. They've been held since 2008. I think since that time we've seen an increase of political attention to the issue of climate change. We've seen a sharp focus on the importance of climate finance, the need for that to be delivered. We've seen in many countries the development of strategies for climate change, often linked with climate change adaptation, adapting to climate change with disaster risk management to prepare for natural disasters such as Cyclone Heta that came through here in 2004. So a message from the roundtable is that these developments are welcome, but we do need to shift to implementation. I think there's a general feeling we have enough strategies and plans, and now we need concrete action at the national levels to adapt to the threats of climate change and natural disasters.
Just looking at Niue, how are we doing compared to other islands in the Pacific in regards to some of the projects that we have implemented looking at adaptation and mitigation?
Well, we heard today about the Niue climate change policy and the process that's developed. That was appreciated by all delegates. So I think the activities that you're undertaking in Niue are very positive. Clearly there's a different situation in Niue as a raised atoll to that in Kiribati, which is highest point is 2 meters above sea level. But still the issues of climate change, the need to respond to disasters is the same across all of the Pacific countries. What we've heard today is the common issues between the Pacific Islands, but the need for focused responses on each country depending on the key challenges and issues. So we've seen at first hand in your beautiful country the activities that you've undertaken to respond since Cyclone Heta, and all delegates were very impressed by the activities being carried out here.
With the director's optimism of changes, other countries much more vulnerable than Niue are still struggling to adjust to the changes of climate. But some, like some islands, has seen changes take place in their countries.
For the last couple of years, it's been raining hard, and the weather is changing, and also the sea level rise is occurring more and more right now. As of today, it's more like it becomes more like normal to the people in Palau right now, because every new moon and full moon we have the tides coming into the food production areas and also the local homes.
So how do you cope?
Right now it's more like it's new to us, and we try to work. That's what I've been doing. Try to work with people, because most of the homes that build on the coastal areas cannot be moved because it's so expensive to move, and also the food production is affected. So what we're trying to do is we try to, for example, build dikes to protect the saltwater from coming in.
Such forum like this, it not only it helps us to voice our concerns, but it brings together the different stakeholders, the government, regional organizations, and also donors as well, to look at the different concerns of our countries, and also how best we can address the concerns of the countries in a forum where not only for government people, but also for the donors as well the regional organizations who are supposed to be helping countries implementing the different priority areas in terms of climate change and disaster risk reduction as well.
Some of the recent events, looking at Japan and the tsunami, how prepared is Palau?
I would say Palau is not prepared for the big disasters, because the other night I called home and tried to find out, because Japan is very close to Palau, and since they have the earthquake and also tsunamis, that will affect Palau. But luckily there was not. And the good thing about Palau in terms of tsunamis, we have the reefs surrounded around the islands, so it can be a good breaker for the waves.
Any plan B for Palau with looking at food security if anything happens? I mean, look at Japan.
Yes, as of now, Palau is highly dependent on imported goods, and we're trying work very hard to make people aware of what's going to happen, in the future. So let's hope that after this meeting, when I go back home, I can sort of like learn from here, so I can work with the people. Because in climate change, it's a phenomenal thing, so people doesn't really believe it until it's happened.
The PCCR will complete on Thursday before participants depart the island. Owners of animals on the island have welcomed with open arms the most needed services available to animals, the SPORE Group. SPORE, the South Pacific Animal Welfare Group, arrived with 2 veterinarians and 6 vet nurses on volunteer work to Pacific Islands to assist with veterinary needs and addressing some issues that affect animals. Early on Monday morning, the group had an early start with surgery in the makeshift shelter in Waipapahi. According to one of the veterinarians, Dr. Alex Ellison, the assistance of SPORE provides greatly supports individual countries address some of the issues, especially with stray animals.
But we're treating everybody that comes through for surgery. We're giving them a flea treatment as well. And we've seen a lot of stray dogs on the road without collars. So I think our next approach needs to be what to do about the stray dog population. I think this time we're dealing mostly with privately owned dogs, but that's obviously helping with the stray dog population as well because they can't breed.
Now, with the domestic animals that you have seen, what are some of the major problems or issues that they have? Is it some of the diseases that they've caught on or started, or is it just having them de-sexed?
I think de-sexing is going to be the most important thing on this island. Most of the dogs that we've seen have been pretty healthy. Haven't seen many cats so far, so I can't make a comment on them. And I think just the ones that we've seen around that we haven't had in the clinic, they all look in good condition apart from their skins. I think flea control is going to have to be an important thing.
Looking at what we have here in Niue, the limited resources that we have, or even having a vet on the island is very difficult. How hard is your job to monitor here? I mean, once you leave, how hard is it for the guys here to monitor?
Well, very hard, I should think. I have been talking to Mark, the policeman, and we've sort of got a plan up our sleeve for rounding up stray dogs and coming back and doing another big de-sexing hit on the stray dogs. So I think that's going to be kind of plan B.
The team will be departing the island on Friday. Niue government will discuss further whether to send monetary donations to the Christchurch relief or holiday packages. Honourable Premier Toke Talangi, who recently returned from talks with Foreign Affairs Minister Murray McCully, said he advised Minister McCully that Niue will look at a different strategy of assistance.
There were 2 things that I wanted to do. Firstly, to talk to the Niueans to see if the Niueans are interested in returning home and living here. We'll be very happy to consider facilitating that if they wish. The second thing is in terms of what assistance we can provide to people in Christchurch. The last time we gave them $50,000 from our coins and stamps fund. This time I think we will do the same thing, but there will be a slight difference. My belief at the present moment is that and you read in the newspapers and you see in television pictures how desperate some of these people are just to take a break away from where they are. And therefore I suggested to the Minister that what we'll probably do is offer holidays to Niue so that these people can come and get away from Christchurch for a little while, enjoy a short holiday and break here, get away from the stress and the depression that will occur, so that they will have time, reconsider their positions, and go back refreshed to begin reconstruction and the rebuilding of Christchurch. We should carefully think about this, look at what's happening in Christchurch, and rather than rush in and give money willy-nilly like that as we did before, I think we should consider the impacts of what has happened in Christchurch and determine, in fact, whether we should offer holiday packages for the people and how we can raise funds to enable us to do that to a larger group of people. I've also heard the Terracotta suggesting that we stop stop funding from New Zealand. To be honest with you, that will mean that we'll have to cut our salaries for people here 50% or more. I don't believe that that's a solution in itself. It's going to impact on Niue both in the short and long term. I don't think New Zealand would ever agree to that in any case, because you're not helping anybody by making yourself destitute.
A decision on Niue's intention is expected in the near future. We will bring you more on this story in our future news bulletins. The Niue Police Department is spearheading a national campaign targeting underage drinking. The department rolled out a new campaign at a special assembly this morning at the Niue High School. We caught up with the team today as they spoke to students on the perils of underage drinking and alcohol abuse. Interesting enough, the private sector has taken on board a supportive role in this campaign, providing the financial backing to kickstart the campaign.
The people who are funding this awareness campaign, and that's the Niue private sector, that's the community of the private businesses on Niue. We also feel a responsibility as business owners. This is an all-community campaign.
I guess this issue has been around for quite some time now, and there has been a number of campaigns. What approach is this particular campaign taking to ensure that the message gets across to the target group or audience?
Well, I suppose in previous campaigns it was more from regional projects or regional campaigns from outside of Niue, saying, okay, the issue of underage drinking, because underage drinking is a global issue. It's not just about Niue. It's not unique to Niue in any way. In this instance, the private sector has stepped up and taken some part in playing and part of this campaign. So from that angle, we wanted to push the whole community concept, that we are all behind this campaign, taking ownership of the campaign. This is not something that was pushed from outside. This is something that was initiated from the Niuean community, from the private sector, the health department, the Niue Police Department, as well as the Niue Youth Council.
Not only are there the socio-economic effects of alcohol abuse, but there is also a concern from a health perspective.
I don't think the students or the young youth realize that the drinking habits that they've gone through, especially like binge drinking, underage drinking, it may not affect them now, but it will affect their health later on in the future. And like we've given out these pamphlets to the students, and there's a diagram of how alcohol affects our bodies, and it just shows like how it affects the brain, our throats, our livers, our kidneys. Pretty much everything's in here. But just take for example, the brain. A lot of them, they change their mentality, they change their attitudes, they think they're confident, they go and make decisions that will affect them later in the future.
What needs to be done at this point in time, according to the campaign team, is for a change in attitudes.
I suppose one of the first things that we need to look at is our attitude. Our attitude towards this notion that Niue is safe. And we have this false sense of security that because we are so small and we know each other, that our children will be safe wherever they may be, whether they're in nightclubs or out with friends. We have this, I'm not sure if it's proper to use a false sense of security that our children are safe. Well, when it comes to alcohol and a young person, health-wise as well as safety and well-being, they're not safe unless they're with their parents or with somebody that a legal guardian. So, yes, I think we need to change our attitude. We need to think about this from a long-term perspective. Children should be allowed, or should be allowed to enjoy their childhood. The legal age for consuming alcohol in Niue is 18. That's already lower than what is in New Zealand. I think New Zealand is 20. So I think we need to allow the children to enjoy their childhood first. There's many things that you can enjoy when you're much older. When you're older, you are better informed to make the right decisions. You're in a position to make informed decisions because you're older. As a young person, under 18, I doubt you have that capacity to make proper decisions, and more so when you're under the influence of alcohol.
The belief is that the issue be dealt with as a community issue rather than an isolated youth issue. The campaign is ongoing and looks to encourage young people to take ownership and responsibility for actions that will benefit them in the long run. After more than 10 years out of practice, the island witnessed the revival of kilikiki, or island cricket. The sport that has been dormant for many years was finally rejuvenated by a group of enthusiasts. A representative from the newly formed Kilikiki Association says that there are currently 10 village teams that have been registered for this season. 8 teams took their skills to the pitch to put on a great display of skills and entertainment for spectators. Each team made up of 25 players each, playing to get the most scores in the set time frame, being 3 hours each way and a break of no more than 30 minutes. Some teams fell short of numbers and were made up of a mixture of age groups. Final scores are yet to be announced, but in the matchup, saw Makefu take on Hakupu in La Kappa, and it was a time as time ran out with a pretty even matching. La Kappa conquered with a low in their game held in Liku. Tamkotonga met their neighbours Avaseli as they battled it out in Vaea, but it was Tamkotonga that won in points. The combined team of Hiktavake and Toi were victorious as they beat their opponent, Vaea, in Hakupu. The confirmed final scores for all games will be made available by the Kilikiki Committee by the end of this week. The cricket season is expected to wrap up in the second week of May. And those are our news stories that we have for you this evening. Don't forget to join us again for our next news bulletin on Thursday evening.